Good day, Miss Jam and classmates. We are the 8th group and we will discuss more about the philosophical perspective of Paul Churchland. I'm Denise Isaji Vergara, the first reporter. Before we start, let us know a little bit of information about Paul Churchland. So, who is Paul Churchland? Paul Montgomery Churchland was born on October 21, 1942 in Vancouver, Canada. In this present day, Paul Churchland is in his late 70s. He is a Canadian philosopher focusing on the philosophy of mind. Paul Churchland is a modern-day philosopher which studies the brain. Churchland is a major proponent of eliminative materialism. Eliminative materialism is our main focus on this discussion. So what is eliminative materialism? But before going further, let us know first the concept of dualism so we can better understand the eliminative materialism. So eliminative materialism of Paul Churchland argues the concept of dualism. So dualism, for much of history, many Western philosophers have held to this theory because it states that the mind and the body are separate. In other words, we all have our physical brain and our human mind. Physical brain, according to dualism, is just an organ similar to the heart and lungs, while the human mind is the seat of our consciousness. It refers to the thinking, feeling, the remembering, the perceiving, the deciding process. It's what gives us our identity. The mind, though we cannot see it, taste it, or touch it, but it does exist. So dualism states that both the physical brain and the human mind exist. And with this assertion, Paul Churchland comes along and disagrees to the concept of dualism because he holds to eliminative materialism, which states that there is only the brain and the mind doesn't exist since it cannot be recognized by our senses. Paul Churchland said that it is eliminative because we should eliminate our folk psychological language, for example, our mind, our soul, and the thought from our vocabulary, and replace it with neurophysiological one. So, my teammates, Miss Quijano, Miss Beru, and Miss Wedem will discuss more about the eliminative materialism. Thank you!
Eliminative materialism. So it is a response to dualism, which was discussed by the first reporter, and also a claim that folk psychology, a theory that tells a human capacity to explain and protect the behavior and mental state of other people, is fake and should be eliminated. So Churchland adheres to materialism, the belief that nothing but matter exists. In other words, if it can be recognized with the senses, then it's akin or similar to a fairy tale. Applying this argument to the mind, Churchland asserts that since the mind can be experienced by our senses, then the mind doesn't really exist. He said that knowledge of others' minds thus has no essential dependence on the knowledge of one's own mind, in which folk psychology fails to explain why damage to the brain results in deficiencies in the mind. So eliminative materialism is the view that because the mind and the brain are identical, we should discard the folk psychology language from our vocabulary and replace it with a new scientific or neurophysiological one, which will be discussed further by the next reporter. Scientific method can be applied to all kinds of situations and dilemmas, and so folk psychology isn't acceptable enough to be considered science since such things should be approached and analyzed.
Hi, this is Angeli Beru, the third reporter for this topic. So eliminative materialism by Paul Churchland, or famously known as eliminativism, emphasizes that there is only one organ, which is the brain, that mental processes such as remembering, learning, finding something sarcastic, feeling dizzy, and feeling hungry. So these states that what we are aware of are actually results from our physical brain itself. In other words, all we think of as the mind is something that the brain does in eliminative materialism. Eliminative materialism argues that our mind's folk psychology is wrong. So when you say folk psychology, it is the common sense understanding of the mind that we use to understand ourselves and others. So again, Churchland disagrees with folk psychology because he believes that it is the physical brain and not the imaginary mind that gives us our sense of self. Paul Churchland have this quote that states we do have an organ for understanding and recognizing moral facts. It is called the brain. So Paul Churchland in this quote highlights that we have an organ called the brain which is used in understanding and recognizing the moral facts that we have encountered in this world. So meaning, it is our brain that causes our knowledge and not our imaginary mind. Churchland believes that our folk psychology will be replaced by the theory of the workings of the brain and the central nervous system which comes from neuroscience. Behaviors is equals to beliefs plus desires is considered as false in eliminative materialism because our behavior does not comes from in terms of our beliefs and desires, but rather in eliminative materialism, our behavior is a result from the interaction of our neurons, synapses, ganglia, and neurotransmitters. That's why behaviors is equals to neurons plus synapses plus ganglia plus neurotransmitters is considered as true. Overall, Paul Churchland argues with the theory of dualism and introduced his perspective about the eliminative materialism. Churchland in eliminative materialism, or known as eliminativism, believes that our way of thinking can be explained through science. Everything that we think, our thoughts, our ideas, and consciousness has a specific concrete explanation in neuroscience. That is what Churchland adheres to his philosophical perspective of eliminative materialism. So the last reporter, which is Miss Wedham, will give further examples in order for us to better understand and comprehend Paul Churchland's perspective about eliminative materialism.
Examples: atheism is eliminativist about God and other supernatural entities. All forms of materialism are eliminativist about the soul. Modern chemists are eliminativist about phlogiston, and modern physicists are eliminativist about the existence of ether. For example, mental processes such as remembering, learning, finding something funny, feeling hungry, feeling dizzy, these states that we're aware of are actually states of the physical brain itself. So, materialism really is the idea that all of what we think of as the mind is something that the brain does. Another example is, if we asked, why am I feeling sad? A materialist can point to the neurochemical changes in our brain. On the other hand, a dualist response to the question is, well, you just are. That's just how the mind works. For an instance, nag-imagine ka na nakigbuwag imong uyab. Imagine ragod kay wa man sad kay uyab. Then, nakahuna-huna ka na sakit man di ay kung buhaton to niya. And then, imong hypothalamus kay ni-regulate og emotional response, which is nakafeel kag sakit. Mao na siya ang materialism. Thank you.